Well, another Vegas Grand Prix under our belt. Second at Vegas now, and I will admit, the second race that has actually been enjoyable. And dare I say it, it's the best street circuit on the calendar at the moment. I'm trying hard to think of where we've had a better race at a street circuit. I know Baku does provide us with some drama, but primarily only due to safety cars or red flags. For the actual racing, which as me, as a fan of F1, I'm here to watch, that is a circuit, Vegas, that to the eye looks uninspiring, but actually provides us good racing and some intriguing strategy as well with the really cold temperatures. The tyres are just, they slide around quite a lot, and we saw a 2 pit stop. Yes, 2 pit stops, definitely the way forward. I do like a 1 pit stop every now and then, but not when it's just you can go 1 tyre for the whole duration of the race. So yes, really happy with that race, really intrigued by the strategy and the overtakes that we got. And well, it's kind of a race of what if, I think, for Lewis Hamilton. And that's not to take anything away from George Russell. He was very consistent throughout the duration of this weekend. In the practice sessions, always in the top 3, and qualifying, of course, he was brilliant as well. But so was Lewis Hamilton up until Q3. And this is where we get to our first question from Racing Rev, who asked, what if Hamilton qualified P2? And that is the big question is, could Lewis Hamilton have won this race this weekend if he started at minimum on the front row, or even just in the top 5? Because starting from P10, you need some fortune. You need a safety car. You need a red flag, even if you're driving absolutely out of your skin. No one has a pace advantage on the grid at the moment to really just drive through the grid from P10 and win a race. Especially when your teammate is in also the best other performing car. And, well, your teammate is also, his name isn't Sergio Perez, his name is George Russell, and he can actually drive pretty quickly in comparison. So George finished 15 seconds ahead down the road, and Lewis, credit where it was due, finished 5 seconds behind him at the end. Or no, actually, I think that went out to about 6 or 7 seconds at the end, as Lewis was, of course, pushing to close that gap. And George had plenty in reserve on his tyres to just kind of pull out a little bit of a gap at the end. But even so, the fact he started 10th and finished within 7 seconds, 10 seconds even, of his teammate, I mean, washed? No. Lewis isn't washed. Yes, he does have issues in qualifying. I think that's well documented. I think there is something mental there that is happening with Lewis. And I think, in general, physically, I think he has struggled with these Pirelli tyres in this new regulation set. We know the Pirelli tyres have been complained about by the drivers up and down the grid, and they're very temperamental. Just like the Mercedes car, where it needs, it's got a very small window of performance. Pirellis are kind of the same as well with their temperatures. A degree here or a degree there can really be the difference between you having lots of grip and having none whatsoever. And that's been the course throughout this season in particular. But when you look back at it, actually, the last 3 seasons, and well, this is probably the best Mercedes car that Lewis has had control of over the last 3 seasons. So that, over time, that confidence has been chipped away at Lewis in qualifying. And that's why now he's kind of accepted him mucking up Q3 is just going to happen. And I kind of disagree with that, to be honest. And look, he did make mistakes in Q3. You can't deny that. And it's really weird that he did make those mistakes. But they are down to him at the end of the day. I don't subscribe to the idea that there's some sabotage going on. I just think at the end of the day, Lewis is at the end of his Mercedes career. This was always going to happen if he wasn't involved in a championship battle, where he would be removed from technical meetings, development meetings, and there'd be a little bit more secrecy come to the end of his career. And that would, as is natural with a driver that's moving to another team, regardless of how long you've been at said team, it makes it difficult for him to set up the car and maybe have, maybe he's I don't know, deep down thinking that maybe he'd be treated a little bit differently in regards to that, but because he's been at the team for so long. But Lewis Hamilton is still just a man, but he's not a washed man by any means. And yeah, I think those reasons are why he struggled in qualifying, and I think he's got inside his own head now. But he definitely, and he admitted himself, he should have been on pole position P1 and Q1, P1 and Q2, but they aren't the qualifying sessions that matter. Q3 is. So yeah, starting in P10, the fact of it he finished in P2 is brilliant anyway, and just shows you what this man can still do at his age if he has a car he's confident in. He was clearly confident in race trim, and just completely knew he's always been more confident, let's be honest, even though he's statistically the best qualifier of all time. It's never actually been his strong suit, which is crazy to say. He's always been better in a race, managing a race, having higher fuel load in the car, managing tyres, as we know, and having time on his side. Whereas qualifying, he's never been the fastest over a single lap. He's been quick, but he's never been the outright fastest. And he was beaten by Nico Rosberg a lot of times. He's been beaten by George Russell a lot of times as well. But look how many times Lewis has outdone George in a race. It's quite a lot, because just that much better when it comes to race day, and that shone through today. And I think that's what we'll see next season in Ferrari as well. I think we'll see a rejuvenated Lewis Hamilton in a fresh new environment, and he'll be raring to go. And I think we always know the Ferrari has been pretty good over a single lap. Look at Charles Leclerc, even Carlos Sainz is no slowpoke either, and he's had some decent performances in qualifying. So he can definitely get a lot out of that Ferrari, and I think he'll feel confident, and especially going into the race days. But yeah, that was a drive of a man that he started on the front row. I think he could have won this. I think he could have done. He at least minimum would have given us fans a brilliant battle for the lead with Lewis and George. I mean, that would have been tremendous to watch, because to be honest, they were pretty much in a league of their own, the Mercedes. I mean, George did very well to fend off Charles Leclerc, and then managed his tyres for once much better than those around him. And yeah, Lewis charging at the end. You just thought, could he? But George had plenty of time in hand and would have had so much more tyres in reserve if Lewis did catch him, as he kind of did in the last couple of laps, where he pulled out a few seconds. But yeah, definitely not a man who's washed. Definitely just a man who is on his way out of a team. But look, I've always said it, doesn't matter what industry you're in, if you hand in your notice, you never, in that notice period, you never work to your peak performance. And that's the same for professional sportsmen as well, no matter what sport they play. So yeah, great to watch. And people will say he's washed. This is still a man who's won 2 races this year. I mean, hardly washed, is it? But yeah, really, really good to watch. And who knows if this is the last time we'll see Lewis Hamilton on the podium in a Mercedes suit. Sticking with Mercedes, we have a question from Ali Hayes, who is pretty much asking, why are Mercedes so quick in cold conditions again, or cooler conditions? They're not even impressed. They just have a weird feeling about this race win. And yeah, I imagine you and many of the Mercedes staff feel the same way, because it has been the biggest conundrum for Mercedes this season, is why does this car perform well in cooler track conditions? Because, I mean, a team of Mercedes magnitude, and I've been fortunate to go to their headquarters and see the operation and the personnel that are involved with creating these 2 cars, and it's crazy to think that no one there is able to pinpoint exactly why this car works the way it does. But then that's kind of been Mercedes as a whole through this regulation set, and particularly this year, at least they've had a car that can win at certain tracks in specific conditions. And George and Lewis have said it numerous times, but this car has such a small window of peak performance, or just performance in general. And we see that again here this weekend. Very cool track conditions. As I mentioned at the start, the track only got up to 18 degrees or just under 19 degrees at its hottest. The coolest it got to was around 11 degrees. And this seems to really suit Mercedes. Now, I think there's a couple of factors here. And I think the biggest one is probably the power unit. I think the power unit works, but it must work more efficiently than its competitors, than the Red Bull, than the Ferrari engine in these conditions. Now, to back that up, you look at the tracks that they've done well at: Silverstone, Spa, Canada, here. The only race where McLaren, who's a customer team of Mercedes and uses Mercedes engines, only race where they haven't really been on the same pace as Mercedes is here this weekend at Vegas. And that's more down to some aerodynamic differences rather than it is power unit. So that kind of, I think, backs up the claim there. Now, why that is, I have not a foggy. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a technician. My technical knowledge of F1 is quite basic. I'm trying to learn more, guys, and provide you more information. But Mercedes, haven't really been able to pinpoint it either, which is absolutely bizarre. But thankfully for George and for Lewis, they've at least been able to fight for a number of races this year. But for a team with Mercedes, it's not what they want. And I'm sure it'll be a bittersweet moment, really, for both Lewis and George. I mean, they've won 4 races between them this year, 2 races apiece, and they had this sort of car throughout every single condition, similar to, say, what McLaren have. Then you do think that those two would have converted more points and put more of a title challenge up than McLaren. But I think also, lastly, I think it's also the combination of the Mercedes being quite good on a low downforce setup. Now, other than really Silverstone, Silverstone is well, it doesn't require particularly a high downforce setup, but of course you want high top speeds around there. You want kind of quite a balanced setup, I presume. But Vegas here is a low downforce setup. Spa particularly is a low downforce setup as well. Canada, Montreal, even in wet conditions, you still run probably not anywhere near as much downforce as you would at other circuits. So I think combined with that, I think the low downforce package that Mercedes have had this year is actually pretty good. And off the top of my head, I don't know other circuits where we've had low downforce setups, but pretty sure they went okay at Monza as well. And no doubt other circuits where they've required that package, they've done well, but they've excelled in the cooler conditions where maybe their engine helps with that. But pure speculative, who knows? Mercedes, I guess, are the only ones who know. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. And they generally are telling us they have no idea, or they do and they're just hiding it, and they're focusing on rectifying what is causing this car not to perform in the hotter conditions for next season when they've got Kimi Antonelli and George Russell in the car. Next, we have a question from Joey Geiger. Do I think that the FIA will investigate Ferrari and Carlos Sainz for the incident where he crossed the line, the pit lane, then went back on track? So I missed this initially on the watch along. I had no idea this happened. And when I watched it back, I can't believe this wasn't even investigated. Like, this is the biggest slam dunk of a penalty you will ever see, and I can't believe it's been missed. And I guess that we know the FIA don't like to issue penalties retrospectively. They say we should have issued a penalty for that, which is what I'm fully expecting to happen later on this week in between now and Qatar. They did it earlier on in the season with Max Verstappen's moving under braking. In Austria, they didn't retrospectively penalise, of course, because of how that ended, that battle with Lando. But they didn't penalise at the time, and they went back and they said, yeah, he should have got a black and white flag at the time, like a warning. And I think this will be the case for Carlos Sainz as well, because you cannot cross the pit exit line once your committed to the pit lane. End of. And he crossed it. Now, the Ferrari pit box was sleeping, and there's a question in regards to that shortly. But yeah, I don't know how he's got away with it. He's a lucky boy. And yeah, there was a few drivers today who their pit crews were caught napping. And I do think that, yeah, Carlos Sainz will not get a retrospective penalty, but he should have got a penalty for that, because that is the biggest slam dunk in any racing series. Especially any of F2, F3, F2 and F1, that's for sure. We've seen that given a number of times. And there wasn't a rule specifically this time around where you were allowed to do this, because the Red Bull Ring is the first one that comes to mind, where the pit lane entry starts basically on the apex of the second to last corner. So it's unique in a sense. So different tracks have different specific rules depending on how their pit lanes are, from where obviously you have to enter them. But Vegas was not that. Definitely not that. And also, where Carlos Sainz rejoins the track, that is like just before the barriers start, or the pit lane starts. Like it's so close, and he's fortunate really that no one was behind him, that close behind him. Lewis Hamilton was pitting, and I mean, Lewis was straight on the radio from the replays that I've seen, complaining that he's crossed the white line. And even with that, Carlos Sainz wasn't investigated and wasn't given a penalty. So yeah, I'm sure Charles Leclerc is sitting back at that looking, he obviously not happy with Carlos Sainz today. I'm sure he'll be looking at that going, he should have had a damn penalty there and he would have been out of my way. But hey ho, it wasn't. And moving on in regards to pit crews, Mike on Track asks, who is more sleepy, the Ferrari or the Alpine pit crew? Well, if you're unaware of what this is, of course, we've just mentioned there, Carlos Sainz bailing out of that pit lane entry because the team weren't ready. They told him very late. He was calling for ages for this pit stop because his tyres were falling off a cliff. And the team had just given the order for Sainz to let Charles Leclerc through. I thought it was an overtake at the time, but no, it was actually team orders. And, well, Alpine, I think, are the sleepiest of the pit crews, because Esteban Ocon, in effect, took a voluntary drive-through penalty. Yes, he went through the pit lane and no one was in his pit box waiting for him. Unbelievable. He had to go back out, do another lap, and pit again. I was not focused on this in the watch-along, so I missed it. And this is why Esteban Ocon, I said, oh, he's finished down in 17th position. Not quite sure what happened there. This is what happened. And yeah, not a good day at the office for Alpine. It was looking like it was going to be at one point. It was looking like Gasly was going to finish comfortably in the points, obviously, after starting third. Ocon, halfway through the race, was in the points as well. But of course, with the engine failure that Gasly had, meant he had to retire. He's third of the season. And then that with Ocon just threw away any opportunity of points or outside opportunity. So yeah, very, very odd. Now, little honorary mention to Lance Stroll. And there were comments about Lance Stroll's pit crew as well. Well, Lance Stroll's pit crew wasn't ready because, unfortunately for him, his radio broke on the first lap. So there is an interview of Lance Stroll stating, I was just trying to do things to inform my team when I was coming into the pit box, but it didn't work. So, real shame for him. But anyway, he was never going to score points because the Aston is super duper slow at the moment. And next question comes from the best_18. He asks, how did the unique layout and high-speed nature of the Vegas circuit impact the race strategies, especially Max Verstappen's rear wing configuration issues? And what are the chances of Max leaving Red Bull? I'll give you the two questions there. Firstly, before we head into Red Bull, can't not ignore the fact that Max Verstappen has wrapped up his 4th consecutive World Drivers' Championship. Unbelievable season, really, from him. It started off normal service resumed, wasn't it, really, with that many wins and in ominous fashion at the start of the season. And, well, how important that run at the start of the season turned out to be. Of course, he has arguably been the most consistent driver throughout the duration of this season. He's made the least amount of mistakes, and that's what you need to do over a 24 race season in particular. Is normally it's he who makes the least amount of mistakes wins. And yeah, Max throughout a lot of this season has been in not the fastest car, but yeah, he was in the fastest car at the start of this season, and I mentioned it in the watch along. He utilised that advantage that he had, and it turned out to be so important in the end. Of course, Brazil was brilliant. A bit of fortune, of course, with the red flag, and there always is, because who knows if he would have won that race. He was driving out of his skin in that race, but George Russell also was driving pretty good as well, and so was Lando, even though Lando couldn't get past him up until the red flag point, bearing in mind after that is of course very different. But yeah, taking nothing away from him, what a season it's been, and I think that's his best one. I do. I know people will say 2021, and look, if you remove entirely how that season ended, I think the way Max has gone about this season is much better than the 21, and of course having a clear advantage in a car over the last couple of seasons. But as Lando Norris has proven, if you have the fastest car, doesn't always mean that you're going to win the World Championship. It's a lot harder than that. And yeah, Max, testament to Max, he's made it look easy over the last few years. So yeah, 4 in a row. Will it be 5? Who knows? Because obviously the competition's very close now. And for us F1 fans, it's really good going into next season. But yes, Max's championship aside, this track layout in particular. So the reason why Max Verstappen wasn't as quick here this weekend as he has been in previous races is primarily due to the low downforce configuration that Red Bull has. It's not the best this season. So you look back at Monza in particular, that is where you have the lowest of low downforce setups. Literally, like Monaco, you pretty much have just specs that are there just for that one circuit, and they were left floundering. And the primary reason for that, and it's not just the sole reason, but a lot of it is due to the rear wing configuration that they've got. So their rear wing, in years gone by, they've had such a pace advantage that the Red Bull has been able to run a slightly more loaded rear wing, more downforce on the rear wing, which would mean that they get more downforce. So it's kind of like a cheat code, really. They had such an advantage that they could not run a very low downforce rear wing that most teams would be doing to utilize the top speed, and they were still quicker. And looks like they've kind of carried that mentality into this season, and they never really created a low downforce specific wing. It was kind of the same concept from last year, as I've just mentioned, and that's why they've been left floundering in the likes of Baku, the likes of Monza, as we said. Not at the start of the season where they had a clear pace advantage, like China. Obviously, Max was quick there, but yeah, primarily once the other teams caught up, they didn't revert to a low downforce wing, and that's what they had here this time around as well, and that's why they had to get the little saw out and they had to do some DIY in the garage. So yes, Max was down on top speed all weekend, but he made up for the difference in time, relatively speaking, to those around him, especially to the McLarens at least, and that's the all-important scenario here, him finishing ahead of Lando Norris, his championship rival. Well, if you can call him a rival now, of course not anymore, as it's now wrapped up. He was much quicker than him in the first and second sector. So that lack of speed that he had in the last sector, which was basically the Vegas strip and the run across the start-finish line, he was kind of nullifying that with the pace that he had in the couple of first sectors. So yeah, that's basically what happened with him. And strategy-wise, the nature of this circuit, so It was a low grip surface, as we mentioned, very cold temperatures. So the tyres are taking a few more laps to get up to temperature. In that time, the tyres are sliding across the surface because, well, they're running low downforce configuration. So they don't have the downforce to generate the heat into the tyres. So the tyres is sliding more. And yeah, unlike other street circuits where the tyre grains and they can get through that and hold on to position, they can't do that at Vegas because it's easy to overtake. And that's why Vegas, as I said at the start of this video, is I think the best street circuit that we go to now. We've got two races, two benchmarks now where we can go, yeah, do you know what, we've actually had good racing regardless of what a predisposition was of coming to Vegas. I definitely wasn't very positive about coming to Vegas. My expectations were still low again today, as they always are for street circuits. But I think Vegas is at the top of the street circuit pile. Let me know what you think in the comments below if you agree. And touching on Max leaving Red Bull, well, it's the age-old question: will he stay at Red Bull? I think it all depends on whether Red Bull can provide him a race-winning car. It's literally as simple as that. If they can't provide him a race-winning car, he'll be off. Don't believe all this spill that comes out that I want to spend the rest of my career. I want to spend my whole career at Red Bull. Hamilton said the same at McLaren. I think Alonso, all these great drivers have said the same. And very rarely do they ever stay at one team throughout their career. So yeah, if Red Bull can't provide Max a race-winning car and Mercedes can, or maybe even McLaren, I don't know, whoever it may be, Aston Martin, Alpine, he will go to whoever can provide him a race-winning car for him to win championships, because that's all that Max Verstappen cares about. And sticking with Red Bull, we have a question from Pilot, who asks, what do I think about the Red Bull theory that they are deliberately sacrificing the Constructors Championship so they can get more budget and win tunnel time for 2026? I am fully on board with this theory, and I think it's smart business, really. It's smart because Red Bull have always put most of their stock into the Drivers' Championship, more so than the Constructors. I think their employees would say differently because they get a bonus for where they finish in the Constructors' Championship. It's more lucrative if you win it than it is finishing in third, that's for sure. But I know that they also get one for Drivers' Championship, or they at least used to. The person I spoke to isn't at Red Bull anymore, so maybe they still do, maybe they don't. But yes, look, Sergio Perez is definitely not finishing in the points or where he should be in arguably a car. Okay, it's a lot more difficult to drive now, but past 2 seasons it's arguably the most dominant car in F1 history. And yeah, look, it also shows that having a fast car isn't a be all and end all. You still need to have the talent to be able to extract that pace out of it, like the greats have been able to do. Schumacher, Alonso, Hamilton, Verstappen. These guys are talents that can extract the pace out of fast cars. Fast cars are notoriously difficult to drive. They aren't easy. And yeah, we are seeing that, of course, with Sergio Perez, whose confidence is absolutely shot. But I don't think Red Bull are that fast. I've done plenty of videos on this, as have many others, and look, he brings in too much money. Simple as, he brings in too much money. And while Max Verstappen is still able to win Drivers' World Championships on his own, which may be different from next year because, as we just mentioned, the performance gap is very close now. We don't know when we go into a race weekend, who's going to be quickest. They don't care. They don't care that Sergio Perez is not scoring points. They'll say in public, of course, damn it, yes, he needs to be doing better. He needs to be doing better. But when they can see the bank balance or the receipts, shall we say, of his sponsors who pay his £10 million wage, who give Red Bull £30 million more, or dollars, whichever currency you want to convert it to, they don't care. And supposedly, the rumours are to be believed, Sergio Perez has secured more sponsors for next season. Of course, Kit Kat, his sponsor that he brought to the sport, is the official chocolate bar of F1 now. There's the rumour, and I'll be surprised if this is true, but there is the rumour that he is the championship contender in the upcoming F1 film with Brad Pitt. And there's the theory there that he needs to stay on because they can't have the championship contender in the F1 movie not be on the grid. But yeah, they don't care. They don't care. And that's the problem for Liam Lawson, Yuki Tsunoda in particular. Liam Lawson doesn't bring a lot of money with him. He's a great talent, but doesn't bring a lot of money. Yuki Tsunoda isn't a Red Bull driver. He's only in that team at the moment because he's a Honda representative, basically. He's backed by Honda. That partnership's coming to an end. And even if he went into the main Red Bull seat, not going to bring a lot of money with him because Honda's going elsewhere now to support Aston Martin. So there's all these moving parts behind the scenes, and supposedly the shareholders are going to decide on whether or not Sergio Perez remains in F1 at the end of the season. I just think it's a foregone conclusion. He's got a contract. He's going to be there for next year. I know contracts mean diddly squat most of the time. The amount of money he brings in, no doubt his sponsors will be able to front up more money if there is questions behind his seat, which of course there definitely is in the public. But at Red Bull, I think everything's okay. And Helmut Marko and Christian Horner, I think it's quite well documented, quite well documented that they have difference in opinion of who should be in that second seat. And well, Horner wants Perez, and Helmut Marko wants one of the youngsters to come in. I think he wants Lawson because he runs the junior side of Red Bull, and of course he wants to see those drivers come through. But yeah, F1's a business at the end of the day, and the further down you finish in the constructors, the more wind tunnel time you get, and that is going to be very important for a new regulation set that is coming up. You have to remember, Red Bull had that cost cap penalty of the reduction in wind tunnel time. Now, yes, they had such a large advantage that it turned out that wind tunnel time maybe didn't have the desired effect that it was supposed to, because the other teams were so far behind in their development. But if you ask the Red Bull engineers, they'll say, yeah, it's affected us. It's affected our ongoing development, and they would like to regain that. And it's only as well £12 million difference from third place to first place in the constructors. That's not a lot in the grand scheme of things. I really did think it was more than that. So the wind tunnel time is more important and more value to them in the long run from a business perspective and a performance perspective than £12 million is right now. But what the employees no doubt would say very different. And of course, it depends on what the shareholders and the owners of the company put value of stock into. So do they value the constructors title more, or do they value the drivers championship more? And as I said, I think Red Bull have always valued the drivers championship more, whereas this year on the flip side, we're seeing McLaren value the constructors more than the drivers. And moving on to McLaren, we have a question from Taco. Do you think McLaren can still win the World Constructors Championship? Do you think it's Ferrari's momentum that is going to help them win? So after today's results, Ferrari finishing in 3rd and 4th and McLaren in 6th and 7th, that gap has been dwindled down to 24 points, a 12-point advantage that they had today, Ferrari over McLaren, and Lando Norris got the fastest lap at the end, so that point could be all important come the end of the season with 2 race weekends remaining. Sprint race at Qatar, of course the main race, and then the last final race in Abu Dhabi. I think it's going to be close. Yeah, I think they can. Obviously, they've got the advantage, but they didn't look quick this weekend, that's for sure. Now, unique set of circumstances Vegas is. It's a street circuit, low downforce setup required. It's a bit different. It is a little bit different. So I'm not going to hold McLaren. I'm not going to say McLaren did too poorly. By the sounds of it, they did. I'm not going to say McLaren have a slow car now. I think it's just, again, they made a setup change, or they made a poor setup change, if memory serves me correctly, that compromised them, similar to what they did in Brazil, really, as well. Brazil, they put on a very loaded rear wing. And what happened there is that Lando found that he just couldn't even overtake George Russell or gain on him in his slipstream. That's really how severe that change was. And I think they've done something similar here this weekend as well. They just haven't been able to hook up the setup all weekend and they were kind of left floundering in that no man's land. Quicker than the rest of the field, but not quick enough to stay with Ferrari, the Red Bull of Verstappen, and the Mercedes. So I think they'll come back strong on more kind of traditional circuits, Qatar and Abu Dhabi. But Ferrari are not going anywhere. No. I mean, Ferrari are going to be keeping that pressure on. But what could trip Ferrari up is the team dynamic right now. Of course, Charles Leclerc is not happy with Carlos Sainz. And a lot of that was aired on the radio. I highly recommend you go and listen to it. And it seems like frustrations have really boiled over now with Leclerc and Sainz. We've seen it bubbling a little bit throughout the duration of this season on the radio and stuff. And I get it to an extent from Sainz's perspective, because he owes Charles nothing. And he owes Ferrari nothing. They're the ones who have decided to get rid of him. Why should he, in respect, play their games? Now, you may be a Charles fan and going, oh, that's ridiculous. That's fine. You want to support your driver. I get it. But ultimately, put yourself in Carlos Sainz's shoes. Why would you listen to any team order? Unless there's something specifically in your contract that says you're going to lose millions of pounds or dollars from not adhering to a team order, then okay. But there's not a justification really for doing that, unless Carlos Sainz doesn't value money in that regard. But yeah, that could maybe trip themselves over, because they could maybe lead in 1-2. It's quite feasible that Ferrari finish 1-2 in the next two races, which easily secure them Constructors. But if Charles Leclerc is trying to go for the win and they're fighting each other, then they could crash out. They could do Brazil all over again. Interlagos, Vettel and Charles Leclerc crashing, tripping up over their own feet. So we'll see. But yeah, McLaren definitely can. But I just still go back to how much of a travesty this would be for McLaren not to win this Constructors title. Imagine having the fastest car for the majority of this season, not taking the World Drivers' Championship to at least the last race of the season, and not winning the Constructors. I mean, it genuinely would be like Ferrari have stolen it. I know there's a lot of recency bias, but look how far back Ferrari were in the Constructors at the summer break. Like they were some way back, and then since Monza, they've really come on strong. They've developed very well late in the season, which is unlike Ferrari to do. But yeah, I still have always kind of said that really, I think the Constructors will come down to how well Carlos Sainz and Piastri do. Not really so much how well Norris and Charles Leclerc do, because they've been towards the top end of every single race pretty much this season, barring some horror shows that they've had. But Piastri and Sainz have been very flaky, and it will depend on how their performances are in the remaining races for them to decide this Constructors Championship. And well, Carlos Sainz, great performance this weekend, could arguably have maybe been on pole. I think he was obviously very close to being on pole, but race pace didn't really have it there, but still good enough to be on the podium. And then look, Piastri, in comparison, absolutely nowhere. I mean, he was well behind Lando this weekend, completely fallen off the boil, and Lando did what he could with an underperforming or an incorrect setup choice on the McLaren. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's the only thing we kind of have left to look forward to in the remaining two races. Blair now asks, was Liam Lawson's result skill-based, or was there a strategy issue in leaving him out too long before pitting? So it was a bit of both, to be honest with you. I think Lawson struggled this weekend at Vegas. He was definitely chasing Tsunoda's tail for the whole weekend. Actually, Tsunoda was just... He was chasing dust, really, because Tsunoda had the better of Lawson all weekend and looked very comfortable, whereas Lawson just, seems to struggle in these low grip conditions. I think he struggled with the setup as well, and Yuki just did so much better. There's no denying that, and of course, there are going to be tracks where Liam Lawson gets absolutely outperformed by his teammate and vice versa. And this wasn't a good one for him. They tried to, I think, goal hang a bit for a safety car. And gain track position if they could get a cheap pit stop with going for the one stop. Only Esteban Ocon went longer on the hard compound tyre than Liam with the same tactic. 33 laps Ocon did on the hard, and Lawson did 28 laps. That's considerably more. It's a good 4, 5, 6 laps longer than most people did on that middle stint. And yeah, once he pitted off that tyre and there was no safety car, inevitably he dropped down the field and yeah, wasn't really able to recover. But once again, got a bit punchy with his racing, which is good to see. So even if you aren't having the best of days, at least you can show your racing chops. But if you were in a top team that you're eyeing for, there are skills there, that moments that can catch the eye. But yeah, a weekend to get ready for Lawson. Struggled here, and I'm sure he'll be looking to end the season high with Qatar, because that second seat is still yet to be confirmed. So it is technically the only seat yet to be confirmed for 2025. So yeah, I'd like to see Lawson in there. I've made my points opinion known on that for quite some time. But yeah, sometimes you're gonna have bad weekends, and this was one of them for Lawson. Our next question takes us further down the grid here, as we are talking about who will finish 6th in the Constructors title. Of course, in the midfield, it is ramping up with only 2 weekends remaining. And Leaving the Gamer asks exactly that. Who do I think will finish in 6th spot in the Constructors Championship? And Machine Chaz asks, who currently has the best car in the midfield going into the last 2 races? Well, it's difficult to say, really. I think it's evident that Alpine have definitely made strides forward with their recent development. And I think, Pierre Gasly, if it wasn't for that mechanical failure today, Gasly would have finished in the points for sure. He would have finished 7th. Finished behind the 2 McLarens, probably. I think that's probably, we can all agree on that. But yeah, Haas, Hulkenberg finishing in the points. He's doing really well, qualifying in Q3. I really do think it could really come down to who's going to perform better out of the last 2 races in regards to Gasly and Hulkenberg. Now, of course, Esteban Ocon could also have a say in that as well. I'm not saying Ocon's a bad driver, but the informed drivers at the moment in the midfield are definitely Gasly and Hulkenberg. Hulkenberg's done it throughout the whole season, and Gasly, I think, has been the standout performer up throughout the whole grid since the summer break. Like, that is how good he has been. So yeah, definitely between those 2 at the moment. Of course, it's 1 point difference between Haas and Alpine, and well, RB are only 3 points behind. Don't rule out Liam Lawson and Yuki Tsunoda as well. Who's gonna go for it? Who's going to win it? Who's going to win it? I think Haas are going to see it through. I really do. I think Haas are going to see it through. I think they're going to come back strong in Qatar and in the race in Abu Dhabi as well. I think Haas will see this across the line. I really do. Unless I'm completely wrong and RB have an absolute stormer, as do Alpine. But yeah, it's an interesting battle to watch for sure. I'm really intrigued. I'm gonna stay with Haas, and part of me wants Haas to do it as well, because I think they've been. I wrote them off at the start of the season, like many others, and I think they deserve that 6th place. Would it benefit them finishing in 6th place? Probably, even with the lack of wind tunnel time that they would have compared to Alpine and RB. But I think Haas need the money, really. They need the money. So them finishing 6th would be great. And I think they thoroughly deserve it, because their performances throughout the year have warranted it, especially Nico Hulkenberg. And Ollie Behrman's done a great job when he's had to stand in for Magnussen as well. Our last question is a Zhou Guanyu question, as it comes from Hodor, who asks, how close was Zhou Guanyu to getting Sauber's first and only point this season? Not close. He finished 11 seconds back from Sergio Perez in P10, but it was a much more positive performance for Zhou Guanyu, and nice to see him not fighting for just P19 with his teammate, or languishing at the back in P20 like he has done for most of this season. It must have been quite a depressing year for Zhou Guanyu with, look, no F1 driver wants to be racing for P20 or racing for P19. That's definitely not what they're there for. And Zhou Guanyu is better than that. Yes, he's had his criticism, rightfully so, for being lackluster this year, but he's in a car that is just not capable of scoring points. Got to realise, as a human being, that must be so demotivating for Zhou Guanyu and Valtteri Bottas to be down there the whole time, and it's a real shame for them. And the dark cloud over his head of whether or not he was going to retain his seat, that probably was left dangling in front of him for the whole season. So yeah, real shame for him that he wasn't able to score points, but a much better performance. And look, hopefully, if this is the end of Zhou Guanyu, he is rumoured to be potentially Ferrari's reserve driver next year, but if this is the last we'll see of Zhou Guanyu in an F1 car this season ever, then look, hopefully he goes out on a high and he's able to at least fight for some positions like he was able to do today and get his elbows out, because yeah, it'd be a terrible ending for both him and Bottas if they're not able to do that in the last couple of races, because no F1 driver wants to go out on a limb like that. And that is it for the Vegas Grand Prix content this week, guys. What a weekend it was. I'm so glad I don't have to get up at 5 a.m. in the morning for the rest of the season now, at least until we then head back to Australia, which will be the first race of 2025 in March. So I've got a good few months now of not having to get up at 5 a.m. in the morning for an F1 race. Qatar and Abu Dhabi are nice afternoon times for me here over in Europe. But a big thank you to everyone, as always, for continuing to tune in to the watch-alongs and these content around F1. I hope you've enjoyed it. But yes, definitely a race of what if for Lewis Hamilton. Potentially could have won his last race in a Mercedes car if he had a decent qualifying. There's no guarantee he would have done so, but he would have at least given us, no doubt, him and George Russell, a great fight for that win, which us F1 fans would have no doubt loved. But yes, Max Verstappen is the story, wrapping up his fourth consecutive World Drivers' Championship, thoroughly deserved. And, well, the World Constructors' Championship is still up for grabs, so there's still some meaning to these last two races. The Qatar, which is a sprint race weekend next week, and then rounding off another triple header this year in Abu Dhabi. So who's going to come out on top, McLaren or Ferrari? Let me know what you think in the comments below. But join me next week for the sprint race in Qatar, and of course the main race on Sunday, and we'll see who will be leading in that Constructors' Championship heading into the last race in Abu Dhabi. We'll see you then, guys. Thanks as always. Hit that like and subscribe button, turn those notifications on, and have a good one. Bye.